Hey John, thanks for the invitation to show my top 5 greatest records of all time. So I appreciate this, and I'm enjoying watching your 3,000 top records of all time as well, except by the time I'm 87, you'll finish your list, but my list is done, right? Here's my list. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to skip my 3 favorite bands, so I'm not including these 3. So these don't count in my top 5 records, at least the way I'm feeling today. 1967's Realistic Pillow, Summer of Love, explodes with this album by the Jefferson Airplane. The great cover photographed by Herb Green, taken in his apartment in North Beach. It opens up with this great drumming of the not always acknowledged great drummer of Spencer Dryden on here. And of course, She Has Funny Cars, great thing. And of course, Grace Lake brings 2 songs from her band, Great Society, Somebody to Love and White Rabbit. My Best Friend. I mean, there's some great Marty Ballin ballads on here. And today, coming back to me as well, How Do You Feel? Embryonic Journey is great. One of the great guitar solos ever. Fairport Convention, Liege and Leaf, great British folk rock. Sandy Denny's voice is unparalleled in so many ways. 1976, Warren Zevon's debut, his Asylum debut. Great noir, great lyrics, the great noir side of Los Angeles with a great supporting cast, but amazing songwriter of the dark underbelly of Los Angeles in the 1970s. One of the most beautiful, brooding, sensual, religious albums of all time. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, The Boatman's Call. I love this record. This record I feel every time. I feel every note, and it's more of a piano-based record, not a loud rock and roll record. Fantastic record, all-time favorite record. And ending out with Beck, this is one of 2 records he did. This is Sea Change, this and Morning Fave are the sort of orchestrated, serene, late-night, wonderful records. And Paper Tiger always gets to me, where he kind of channels Serge Gainsbourg's music directly on that. What a gorgeous, beautiful record. So take care. John, Digital Gramophone makes no sense. I'm still waiting for my residual on my voiceover for your channel.
At number 30, I have Graceland by Paul Simon from 1986. Despite hearing You Can Call Me Al all over the radio when I was a kid, it wouldn't be until I was in high school before I would hear the entirety of this album. I saw Paul Simon perform with Ladysmith Black Mambazo on a rerun of SNL, and that's really what influenced me to get the CD. It would turn out that songs like Graceland and Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes would be favorites amongst a group of my friends. In my opinion, it's Paul Simon's crowning achievement. And not only because of the songwriting, but because of the journey that he went on in search of the sound and the life-changing experience of exchanging musical ideas with the musicians that play on this album. You know, as controversial as that journey might have been at the time, I think a lot of people my age grew up with this album because their parents were already, you know, pretty big fans of Paul Simon. And, you know, it was probably, as kids, a lot of people's first exposure to any music that was recorded by African musicians. It definitely laid the groundwork for me as a future fan of music from the African continent. This album and the next one on my list. At number 29, I have Remain in Light by Talking Heads from 1980. I was probably around 13 or 14 years old. And I used to stay up late at night and watch reruns of SCTV, the brilliant comedy sketch show ahead of its time. And one of the episodes, they actually showed the music video for Once in a Lifetime. And it was weird and quirky and kind of funny. I honestly wasn't sure if it was part of the comedy sketch. But anyway, I read, you know, on the screen that it was Talking Heads, and I actually bought the Sand in the Vaseline compilation as a new release. I don't remember exactly how I got to Remain in Light. I vaguely remember some kind of connection to Sly Stone and Herbie Hancock, probably something I read in the liner notes of some album by those artists. The African polyrhythms on this album definitely steered me towards Fela Kuti down the line. But for all of the influence that African music had on Jerry Harrison and David Byrne and Brian Eno, Weymouth and France, their playing on this record is almost more indebted to American soul and funk from the 1970s. You know, taking all of those influences into account, when you really break it down to brass tacks, it's really just an art rock album, you know, but it's an incredible art rock album, and one that would set such a high bar for popular music, you know, for years to come. At number 28, I have Hunky Dory by David Bowie from 1971. So right out of the gate, with the song Changes, Bowie pretty much foreshadows the next 40 years of his career. And his work would only get more cohesive over time as he embodied those future personas. Well, with this album, I've always called it David Bowie's singer-songwriter album. And really because of its kind of lack of cohesion, you know, stylistically, and the broad array of subject matter. Songs inspired by different philosophies and the occult, songs that are letters to his newborn son and to his heroes, like Dylan and Lou Reed and Andy Warhol. There are tinges of the glam rock that would kind of set the stage for Ziggy Stardust and Aladdin Sane. But this album is mostly centered around acoustic guitar and Rick Wakeman's just incredible piano playing. So sure, you know, it's a little bit all over the map, but like certain albums by Jackson Browne or Harry Nilsson that have a lot of different styles of song, like within them, you know, the songs are just so great, you know, that the songs on those albums and this album are so great that they don't really need a singular theme or a singular sound to kind of hold it together. It's just simply a brilliant display of his artistic talents. You know, my buddy Dean calls it Bowie's most human album, and I think that's just perfectly put. At number 27, I have Things We Lost in the Fire by Low from 2001. So it was back in the late 90s, and I was off visiting one of my best friends, Rob, at where he went to college. And he had this group of friends that he had made through working on the college newspaper. And some of them worked for the college radio station. One of them was like an aspiring music critic. And we were over at that guy's house, and he was listening to the album I Could Live in Hope by Low, their debut record. That was the first time that I'd ever heard Low, and I would hear Low for many years after, many times, because of my friend Rob. He was obsessed with their song titles and their album titles, how epic they sounded, and he would title his own mixed CDs after a lot of those song titles and album titles. I was instantly attracted to Alan Sparhawk and Mimi Parker's vocals. Just beautiful, beautiful vocals. And, you know, they're slow building, very, very simple song structure. It was like nothing that I had in my music collection at the time. Long Division was the first album of theirs that I actually bought. And Rob would eventually put the song Like a Forest off this album on a mix for me. And I listened to that song over and over and over. And Things We Lost in the Fire was quite an obsession for me at the time that it came out. It was also the obsession of a girlfriend of mine that I had at the time. I have this memory of us in my car. We were driving at night down an interstate, and the snow was falling. It was, I think, around December. And that's a rare thing, snowfall in the Piedmont of the Carolinas. And we were listening to this album, and the song July was playing. And I just remember, you know, just how beautiful the snow was falling. And I have such an attachment to that memory, and not really because of her specifically, but more just the general feeling of being in love, and the uncertainty that comes with being young and not giving a shit about the future. It's just it's a very happy, slow core memory for me, if you will. But the next year and a half would be a pretty tumultuous time for me. And this album played a huge significance in that as well. I mean, Lowe's music has always provided a strong sense of catharsis for me, you know, in troubled times. Now, over the last 20 years, Lowe has become one of my favorite bands. And no matter what direction they shifted their sound, or even if it didn't shift at all, I've just always been committed. I just absolutely love this band, and this album is my favorite one. At number 26, I have Grace by Jeff Buckley from 1994. Do you guys remember MTV Buzz Clips? Well, the song Last Goodbye was the lead single off this album, was a buzz clip. And I thought that song was just fantastic, and so I went out and got the CD. It was a mind-boggling album for me as a 16-year-old. This bombastic, Zeppelin-esque, alternative rock mixed in with all these other songs inspired by jazz and folk, R&B, even a traditional carol. A lot of the rock songs on it definitely sound like they belong in the 90s, but this album has such a timeless sound that really doesn't owe anything to one specific decade. I've mentioned before that as a teenager, a lot of times I was just flying blind when it came to music, and especially musical criticism. So I didn't really know exactly what was being said about this album at the time, but I knew that I had something special. I just knew it because I loved the album. For some reason, though, I could never get my friends in high school to hop on board. Even my friends that loved Zeppelin, I would try and point out to them, you know, like why they would like this album. And I don't know, his vocals were just too operatic for them, or if it just didn't rock enough, like all the way through. It was incredibly frustrating for me, though, as like a teenager, because of how much I was just in love with it. But I would actually find that crowd later when I went to college. And when you talk about Jeff Buckley, what you talk about is that voice. It's just an absolutely amazing voice. And this album in particular, the only finished studio album of his, as a lot of people know, it's one of the greatest vocal performances ever recorded, in my opinion. I've mentioned a lot of tragic deaths in this list so far, but this one is tough because we had such a small sample size. And there was really absolutely no telling, like, to what heights he would eventually take his music.
Hello viewers of John Digital Gramophone, my name is James Griffiths and John has asked me to do a quick rundown of my 5 favourite albums of all time. An impossible task, but I've come up with 5. So the concept I chose for this was the 5 records that bring back the warmest memories of home and hearth, being a young person with my family, enjoying records all together with mum and dad, and sometimes grandparents as well. So here they are. At number 5 we've got Paul Simon, Rhythm of the Saints, which takes me right back to, I think it was Christmas 1991. This next one takes me back to my earliest childhood. This is 10cc, the original soundtrack, and I reckon I'm Not in Love by 10cc was the first proper pop song I ever heard, and the track Blackmail from this record scared me half to death when I first heard it. At number 3, this is a record that me and my dad listened to a lot when I was in my teens, and it's still a record which absolutely blows my mind every time I hear it. Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield. That's a record which carved new neural pathways into my brain. Yeah, got some great memories of that one too. This next one pretty much defined my whole world back in 1978. This is the album that started it all for me in many ways. This is Band on the Run by Wings, recorded in Lagos. Contains, I think, McCartney's best solo work. And it's impossible for me to even express how much I love this album. I've just got so many memories attached with it. One great memory I have actually is going to the cinema to see a double header of Superman 1 and Superman 2, and then coming home and acting out the entire 2 movies just on my own in the living room to the accompaniment of The Age of Plastic by the Buggles. Thanks for watching.
At number 25 I have Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder from 1976. Don't tell me that making a list of 200 of your favorite albums is really easy and you're not really narrowing things down because I'm leaving off albums like Intervisions and Talking Book, you know, to make room for other artists. But this album is his opus for sure. I mean, can you think of any other album that takes on such an epic album title and actually like lives up to it? You know, through the songs. I mean, it's all here. Songs about love, songs about pain, songs about music itself, songs of, you know, touching on societal commentary. The Maximalist arrangements are impeccable. Those really different, unique, like keyboard sounds, the use of all the different vocalists, the extended jams. I mean, it's kind of a progressive R&B album, if there ever was such a thing, a prog R&B album. When we talk about songwriters, we're always using the names Dylan, Simon, Mitchell, Lennon, McCartney. What about Wonder? You know, and I'm not the only person that feels that way. I know that he is regarded as one of the greatest songwriters, but it's just, every once in a while, it's nice to just kind of have that reminder, you know, that he's one of the best. I mean, he sits with any of those artists. At number 24, I have Southeastern by Jason Isbell from 2013. Now, I've already done like this 3-part mini-series on Jason Isbell, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this album. I'll leave a link in the description below. This is an album that was born in a period of him finding sobriety and also a period of rediscovery, you know, a purpose in life for him. And it has some of the greatest songs written in the last 20 years. There's a lot of darkness on this album, very much akin to like Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska. You know, even if you don't really like Americana singer-songwriters, I challenge you to listen to the songs Cover Me Up, Elephant, Live Oak, Yvette, and tell me that those songs are not lyrically just incredible story songs.
I lost a good friend Christmas time when folks go off the deep end. This woman took the kids and he took on a pen enough to kill a man of twice his size. Not for me to understand remember him when he was still a proud man. A vandal smile, baseball in his right hand, and nothing but the blue sky in his eye. And still compared to those the stones throw away from you, our lives have both been relatively easy. Take a year and make a break, there ain't that much at stake. The answers could be relatively easy.
At number 23, I have Yankee Hotel Foxtrot by Wilco from 2002. So after being so in love with Being There, with Wilco's Being There, I wasn't quite ready for an album like Summer Teeth when it came out. I was still just so heavy into that kind of alt country sound, that rootsier alt country sound, and I didn't know how to feel about this band going in that kind of like experimental pop direction. But by the time Yankee Hotel Foxtrot came out, I had really warmed up to the band's experimentation, and this album struck me in a way that a lot of like Radiohead's albums from the previous 5 years had impacted me. And with this album, that's how I started to look at Wilco. They were like the American Radiohead, in my opinion. They're those albums that, as music fans, we all call growers. And there's no album that I can think of at a time in my life that was more of a grower than this album when it first came out. Of course, it was the more straight ahead songs like Camera, War on War, Pot Kettle Black, Heavy Metal Drummer, and even like the kind of Steely Dan-esque cool of Jesus, etc. You know, those songs that were easy to fall in love with at first, but upon repeated listens, that was when I really discovered that the real magic was in songs like the slower burning songs like Radio Cure, Ashes of American Flags, Poor Places, and Reservations. Jim O'Rourke takes the trophy home for his mix. I mean, what did he say? I think he said that he would get them dropped by the label. That's exactly what happened. Much has been said about the creative collaboration between Jay Bennett and Jeff Tweedy. I mean, there was even a documentary that kind of obviously showed like the darker side of it, and Bennett being kicked out of the band. But the most welcome addition to Wilco and for this album, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, it was the drummer Glenn Cochee. It's his artistic playing, almost kind of like a disciple of Jackie Liebezeit, that really elevates these compositions to a level of sophistication that Wilco had never achieved before. At number 22, I have Radio City by Big Star from 1974. And at number 21, I have Number One Record by Big Star from 1972. I'm grouping these two albums together because it's difficult for me to separate them. And that's due to how I discovered or how I listened to these albums for the first time. They were grouped together on a CD reissue. I mentioned the Southern Music compilation that I had attained through the Oxford American magazine. It was back when I was talking about Nina Simone. And it was in that magazine and on that compilation that I first read about Big Star and Alex Chilton. Number One Record is a pristinely recorded album. Every instrument kind of exists on its own plane. And there's a surprising amount of space in these carefully constructed 3-minute pop songs. Radio City has slightly rougher edges. You know, songs like Daisy Glaze and Life is White are in my top 5 Big Star songs of all time. What Big Star did for me when I discovered them, and what they did for probably a lot of people, you know, when they first heard them, was they kind of filled in some gaps in the linear history of rock and roll. I mean, I had heard Tom Petty already up to that point. I had heard Cheap Trick already up to that point. R.E.M. and other jangle pop bands. But discovering this power pop band, you know, it really provided some context, you know, and I heard all of those groups differently from that point on. And of course, Big Star would always be a reference point for me when it came to any other power pop band that I would discover, you know, from the 90s or the early 2000s. There are just some places, certain towns, much like Muscle Shoals in Alabama. There was something in the water in Memphis. And the Big Star is a perfect example of that.
Years ago my heart was set to live. Oh, and I've been trying hard against unbelievable odds. It gets so hard in times like now to hold on, but guns they wait to be stuck by. At my side is God. No one going to turn me around. Ain't no one going to turn me around.
So I was really hoping to have this actually wrapped up by Thanksgiving weekend. But last week I was battling a bad cold. Everything's fine. I went and got tested and came back negative and everything. So, but I just sounded like shit, so I couldn't really record. Well, it sounded like shit more than I normally sound like shit. And I just couldn't record videos. And now this week's like a short week because we're about to get into Thanksgiving and family visits and driving all over the Carolinas. And so I'm hoping that I get this video up before Thanksgiving. But yeah, I mean, you know, we'll wrap it up next week after the holiday. And yeah, I don't know. Hope everybody's doing well. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone that observes it. And we'll see you on the next one. All right, bye.
Digital gramophone makes no sense.